Hi guys, this is Frankie from Frankie Tech, and I'm here guys with a video I've been looking forward to making for quite some time. This is it guys, this is the camera comparison between the Xiaomi Mi 8, the Mi 8 SE, and the Redmi 6 Pro. Now I've had these phones kind of for varying amounts of time, so the Mi 8's coming up on 3 weeks. I've had the Xiaomi Mi 8 SE for around 2 weeks, and I've had this guy right here, the Redmi 6 Pro, for about coming up to 1 week now. It's been a really interesting experience with these phones. I've been really excited to see the speed at which Xiaomi has been releasing phones recently. And I'm really excited to make this comparison now between these three phones. I've had a chance to test them in different scenarios. I've tested the camera and the video. But before we kind of jump into that, let's kind of jump into just a little bit of the basic specs. And I'll just talk about my experience thus far with these phones. So let's jump into the camera specs real quick of these phones. So let's start with the Xiaomi Mi 8. The Xiaomi Mi 8, just kind of quick rundown of the basic specs. Snapdragon 845, 6 GB of RAM. It's got that 6.21 inch screen. It's definitely the flagship kind of the bunch right here. And kind of more in depth with the camera specs. This is the only phone here that's actually got the dual rear 12 megapixel camera setup. So those are two 12 megapixel cameras on the front. The main one is an f1.8 aperture, with the secondary one being a f2.4 aperture. And for the front-facing camera, we have a 20 megapixel f2.0 aperture, so that's capable of 1080p shooting. So this is definitely the flagship in terms of camera specs right here. Now looking at the Xiaomi Mi 8 SE, quick rundown of the specs of that. It's the 710, and if you guys want to see more details about the performance of these phones, check out one of my earlier videos I did versus the Mi 8 and the Mi 8 SE in terms of performance. But running down the specs quick, it's a Snapdragon 710. You got the Adreno 616 versus the 630 in the Mi 8. Here we got 6 GB of RAM as well. Obviously, you can see there the screen, the size is actually a little bit smaller, and is running 5.88 inches there. But it's still got a full HD resolution, 3120 battery. And now just talking about the camera specs real quick. This has also got a dual camera setup, but it's a little bit different than the Mi 8. Here we have an actual f1.9. Let me double check that real quick. Yeah, that's right, an f1.9 primary shooter, and then you have a 5 megapixel secondary shooter at f2.0. So it's a little bit of a different setup here with the Mi 8. And in terms of the front-facing camera on the Mi 8, we have the 20 megapixel front-facing f2.0 shooter. So I think it's the same one as the same front camera as the Mi 8, the regular Mi 8. And finally, let's go over here. This guy, he's kind of shown up in this camera race here, but we're going to see how he does. The Redmi 6 Pro coming at a much lower budget price, and that shows in terms of the specs too, with a Snapdragon 625, 4 GB of RAM. I'm running the 64 gig version here. Definitely slightly smaller screen, but not considerable versus the Mi 8 SE. It's still a 5.84 inch screen in full HD resolution there, and it's got the biggest battery of the bunch, actually 4,000 milliampere. So you can imagine that battery life on the Redmi 6 Pro is actually going to be pretty stellar. But let's look at the camera actual specs here, and you can definitely tell already it's going to be performing in a much lower level. You got a dual 12 megapixel plus 5 megapixel camera setup right there, and the main shooter is an f2.2 aperture, so that's definitely a bit lower than the other two phones. And your 5 megapixel secondary shooter is also an f2.2, and there is also no autofocus on that 5 megapixel secondary camera. So it's definitely going to be a step below the other offerings right here. In terms of that front-facing camera, we have a 5 megapixel, which is capable of 1080p shooting. And in terms of the actual video performance, just so you guys know, at least as of right now, the Mi 8 and the Mi 8 SE are capable of shooting in 4K. I've done my video comparisons in 1080p. I've decided to kind of just go that route for now, but to be fair to the Redmi 6 Pro as well, which as of right now is really unable to shoot 4K. I know that there's an open camera app you can use for that, but I'm just looking at out-of-the-box performance, and as of right now, the Redmi 6 Pro is maxed out at 1080p. But anyways, guys, you came to watch a camera comparison, and this is kind of what this video is about. So let's kind of go through now and see how these phones perform and see what kind of results we achieve at the end. Let's have a look. This is a front-facing camera test of the Mi 8. Just walking down this small corridor here. Gonna turn around now. Quick test of the Xiaomi Mi 8. Pretty good stability. Looks good overall. This is a quick test here of the Xiaomi Mi 8 SE. Just doing a quick test here. Walking around. It's looking pretty good. Pretty good stability. Very similar to the Mi 8 overall. Pretty good. Here's the quick test of the Redmi 6 Pro. It's a little closer than I expected. Exposure is getting a bit off there. A bit more jittery. But you know, pretty usable shot overall. Pretty usable shot. 1080p on the Xiaomi Mi 8. And it looks pretty clear. Pretty good colors overall. You can see it there. Pretty good colors. Pretty good lighting. All in all, not too bad. And here's the video on the Mi 8 SE. And I think it looks pretty solid overall. Good color, definitely. And I think this will get a lot less jittery on post-production overall. And lastly, here is the Redmi 6 Pro. Definitely a step below the others. Colors aren't so great on this one. So what did you guys think? Did you think the Mi 8 ran away with it? Did the Mi 8 SE hold its own? Did the Redmi 6 Pro just crash and burn? I got to tell you guys, after kind of looking at the results, just from this very unscientific, but I think a pretty thorough camera comparison, I think it's clear that the Mi 8, the Xiaomi Mi 8, with its dual 12 megapixel camera setup and with kind of all the bells and whistles of just a better kind of overall setup, really took the show, stole the show here. In terms of just video performance, I definitely felt the colors were brighter, the stabilization was on just very clear, very steady. I think the the low light shots is where it really stood out, and it was just really incredible to see how much better the Mi 8 performed versus the other two right here. So if you're looking at just perfect, like your best version of camera quality, your ideal camera quality in a Xiaomi phone, look no further than the Mi 8. Now, talking about the Mi 8 SE, I think it actually performed pretty well. I think overall it kind of held its own with the Mi 8. It's definitely not to the level as you could see there, especially in the low light shots versus the Xiaomi Mi 8. But in terms of the other shots, I really liked how HDR was implemented in this phone. And this is an AMOLED panel alongside with the Mi 8, and I thought maybe the colors were because of that they look better on the phone. But in reality, looking at the results on the screen, I actually noticed afterwards the colors were really well done, and the camera stability, while it had maybe a little bit more jitter in it, it actually stabilized pretty well, and I was pretty happy with the performance, especially with the front-facing camera performance. The Mi 8 SE is definitely having a very similar performance level with that 20 megapixel front-facing shooter as the Mi 8. So I would say if selfie games, if if your goal is to have a really big use of your front-facing camera, and you want to have a very similar shooter, but you don't want to pay the price of the Mi 8, then the SE is definitely your choice. That's going to be the one to go with here. And now, lastly, our poor Redmi 6 Pro. Oh boy, if that test did not reveal just how limited, I guess the limitations of this phone, it definitely was dead last, third place there in terms of performance. I mean, I thought it had a few good shots. There were a few decent shots in, in kind of brighter settings. But oh man, those low light shots were pretty atrocious. It just cannot perform to the level of the other two phones right here. And I mean, that's really kind of that's something that I think I was expecting. I didn't expect it to be that further back, but it really is something that is not surprising to me. And I think I saw one of the earlier videos from Tech Tablets talking about the shooter and this being the same one as the Xiaomi Mi S2. So it is definitely a budget shooter in the Redmi 6 Pro. And so if camera quality is something that you really value, you definitely want to take the step up from the Redmi 6 Pro to something like the Mi 8 SE. You're going to get a better camera performance overall from that. But overall, guys, I think it was a very interesting comparison here. Would love to hear your thoughts on how the cameras, the shooters, and the video quality compared on all of these. And definitely hit me up with any questions you have, any kind of additional questions on, and I'll obviously be doing continual tests on these. But I think that was a lot of fun to do with these three phones, and definitely kind of get a spectrum beyond just the kind of maybe higher end, being able to include the budget option and see how it performed. But thanks again, guys, for watching this video. I really appreciate all the support. Definitely hit me up with any likes, any comments, and definitely subscribe to the channel. I'm really appreciating all those subscriptions. Keep them coming, guys, and hope to keep making this channel bigger and better, as I always say. But hope you enjoyed that comparison, guys. And this is Frankie Tech signing off. Y'all have a good day.